The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Multiple sources telling CBS News that Pete Hegseth's position as President-elect Trump's pick to be Secretary of Defense may now be in jeopardy. Hegseth faces a number of scandals, including allegations of sexual misconduct, also alcohol abuse. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, once a Trump rival, now an ally, is said to be under consideration to replace Hegseth.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Thursday. Sorry I missed you yesterday. Thank you very much to everybody for the nice notes on the episode on Tuesday and the condolences from my uncle. I really do appreciate that, and I passed them on to my cousins. So anyway, all right, I wanted to start off with that because I did want to dovetail. I'm dovetailing today, from what I talked about in the last episode in terms of, some of Trump's cabinet appointments. And, again, this is another situation where I just wish people would stop being such fanboys of everything that Trump does. And I'm talking about the supporters, I'm not talking about those critical of him, because again, those critical of him have Trump derangement syndrome and everything he does is going to be terrible. And so those that have the Trump worship syndrome, God, I wish they would just get it in check and be like, dude, some of these appointments suck. And this Pete Hegseth guy is the perfect example. This is absolutely a terrible appointment, and he is under fire for, so many things. And honestly, I'm gonna make this super easy. Like I look at this guy and he's just white trash to me. He just is, man. This dude is I don't like him. I really don't like him. I don't like the things he talks about. He's definitely racist. He absolutely is. This guy, and I don't really throw that word around very often, and I think it's completely overused. But when I hear the things he talks about, and I'm going to play for you a couple examples, this is not the Secretary of Defense. This guy, first of all, I think he's only 44 years old. And again, I'm sorry, I think that's too young for that position, and especially for somebody that is as volatile as this guy. Now, there are crazy amounts of information about him being drunk and drunk at meetings. There's too much of that out there for it not to, be true. And again, where there's smoke, there's fire. And all the stuff that he's accused of, I mean, first of all, he had an affair with his Fox producer and got her pregnant while he was married. The guy has 7 kids, by the way. And again, nothing wrong with that. But so he had an affair with his producer on Fox, got her pregnant, divorced his wife, and then ended up marrying her. And then he cheated on that gal too. And that's part of this sexual assault that's come out against him, where he paid off the woman in 2017 on that. He paid her off. All right, you know what? I just pulled out my phone. See, this is why you have to download these apps. So I'm using Gemini now, the ChatGPT competitor from Google. And so I asked Gemini, can you give me the background on his marital life? And Gemini came back with, Pete Hegseth has been married 3 times. His first marriage was to Meredith Schwartz, his high school sweetheart. They divorced in 2009 after he admitted to having 5 affairs during their marriage. In 2010, he married Samantha Deering. They have 3 children together. However, their marriage ended in 2017 after Hegseth had a child with Fox News producer Jennifer Rochette. Hegseth and Rochette married in 2019. So anyway, I mean, I could kind of go on and on about this dude, but this is not a good pick. I'm sorry, again, I'm not some choir boy when it comes to things. I'll tell you that for sure. But I don't want somebody that's cheated 26 times on 3 different wives. I'm being a little facetious there, but that's not the Secretary of Defense and not a 44-year-old guy. And then again, listen to this clip.
The White House is staffed by pro-Palestinian millennials.
It is, whose reflex is to tweet both sidesism. Hey, both sides are responsible. That's their reflex. In fact, the Palestinian branch of the State Department in Israel tweeted something just like that right away and then deleted it. That's their instinct inside the DNA of the modern Democrat. Blame both sides. Calm down, everybody. I watched Palestinian. It weren't just terrorists. This is an army.
He literally just said, I watched, which is just such a lie, but let him finish.
Go in and pull grandmas out and murder women and children. And what Israel's about to do is bring hell down on Hamas if they do it right. I mean real war, not like TV war. Real war, stacking bodies, dead people.
Real war, stacking bodies, dead people. Okay, yeah, that dude, this guy, not a fan.
Because Bibi Netanyahu's not going to mess around here. What happens when that happens? Will the pro-Palestinian millennials stay off their Twitter keep? I don't think they're going to be able to resist, let alone the squad. So it's going to take real fortitude to actually stand behind Israel.
All right, so that pretty much sums it up. So here's what I think is the deal with Pete Hegseth. And, I'm trying to make sense of Trump's picks because, in all honesty, very few people are being critical of it. Candace Owens is. I am. See how I put myself on Candace Owens' level? Dude, if you guys are not listening to Candace Owens, I'd almost tell you don't listen to me, listen to her, but I'm not going to say that. But seriously, she's good. She's good. And again, I'll tell you the people that I'm seeking out these days are the ones that are conservative, maybe, are Republican, maybe, but they're calling out Trump. They don't have Trump worship syndrome. They're not a fanboy like so many of these other guys. Like it's just nauseating hearing from fanboys of his because, again, they don't look at anything objectively. It's funny. I'm like thinking to myself now, what's worse? Is it worse to have Trump derangement syndrome or is it worse to have Trump worship syndrome? They're both pretty bad, but I appreciate her for calling him out. And there's a few others that are doing it. Tucker Carlson's doing it as well, but he doesn't call Trump directly out. He calls the pick out. So he went after Mike Pompeo and obviously that seemed to work. But anyway, my theory on this is this. My theory on this is this. Yeah, my theory on this is this. So some of these picks that Trump's made just make no sense. Pete Hegseth is one, Marco Rubio is another. And I will tell you, and this is just straight out fact, the common thread in all of the ones that haven't made sense to me, there's two common threads. One is they are definitely all kind of warmonger, military industrial complex people. And then two, they are all like super Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, and unbelievable supporters of anything Israel does. And Israel could drop a atomic bomb and kill every Palestinian, and honestly, they wouldn't care. So those are the two threads. Honestly, they are. Those are the exact two threads that are consistent with all of these picks. So then the question is, well, why is that? And I'll give you the answer. It's because Miriam Adelson, who is a huge Israeli Jewish donor of the Republican Party, her husband was Sheldon Adelson. He was like a Las Vegas casino magnate, kind of like Steve Wynn, multi-billionaire guy. And Miriam Adelson committed over $100 million to Trump's election campaign. And so all of these appointments that, anyone with half a brain is shaking their heads at, they're all quid pro quos. And I love that term, quid pro quo. They are all quid pro quos, meaning they are the return favor for that $100 million plus that Miriam Adelson donated to Trump. And they are. Now, here's the twist. I think Trump, and Hegseth is the perfect example. I think he's putting the people that, let's say, she or that side wants into as a nomination. And I do think he knows some of them are not going to get through and they're not going to be confirmed. And I think Hegseth was exactly that. I think that's another case of him putting someone in. He knows they're not going to get in, but he kind of owes that favor. He owed her that, so he does. And then when they don't get elected or they don't pass confirmation, he can be like, hey, listen, I tried. Now, the other person that they're talking about in terms of replacing Hegseth,
we're up by 40 points over the sanctimonious.
Once fierce foes on the campaign trail, sources confirm President-elect Donald Trump may now tab Florida Governor and Navy veteran Ron DeSantis as his Secretary of Defense.
All right, the last thing on Pete Hegseth. Man, I talked a little too much about him.
Hegseth also declined to elaborate on a 2018 email from his mother published by the New York Times, calling him an abuser of women. I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego, she wrote.
Damn, bro's own mom goes scorched earth on her son in a New York Times piece. Anyway, like I said, I just don't think it's a good pick. And, you really do wonder what's going through Trump and his team's picks, the ones that don't make sense, because, this is round 2. They made all their mistakes in the first presidency with guys like John Bolton. And so you think they would not. And again, especially who's got Trump's ear right now? Elon's got his ear. Vivek has his ear. I'm sure J.D. Vance has his ear. Tucker Carlson definitely has his ear. And these are smart guys. And these are guys that I'm sure would tell him, all right, dude, this is not the guy. But if you need to quid pro quo Miriam Adelson, then put this guy in and you'll know he won't get elected or confirmed. And then we'll go from there. All right, moving on from cabinet picks. All right, so in addition to Ukraine and Gaza, now we've got situations going on in Syria and South Korea. Now, I'm going to talk about Syria and South Korea maybe in Friday's episode, but I did want to talk a little bit more about this whole Ukraine-Russia thing, because obviously that's the most volatile, of the 4, probably the most volatile right now. So give my main man, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, another listen, because honestly, this falls into the repetition is the mother of all learning.
Let me just explain in 2 minutes the Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification.
All right, really quick, let me jump in. So we've talked about this before. I know we have, but I really want to drive this home. Again, this takes it back to 1990. This was basically the kind of the end of the Cold War, and it really was the German unification process that took place, where East and West Germany became Germany. And part of that was they basically promised Mikhail Gorbachev, at the time the president of Russia, that, hey, we're not gonna expand NATO up to your borders.
The U.S. then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power.
All right, again, he talks about the neocons. Those are the neoconservatives. I've said it before. I really do think the Clintons and the Bushes and that whole crew is one big family. Now, what he's about to get into next, I wish I could show you guys a map, but basically just think about it like this. Think about your right hand, raise your right hand in the air, and that is Ukraine. And then next to your right hand to the right is Russia. So basically, NATO is starting to bring in all the countries to really bring your left hand and right hand together. And your left hand is all the other countries like Poland and Hungary. And then that's coming right up to the border of your right hand, which is Ukraine.
The expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic.
You know what? If you want to really understand this, just Google NATO countries and it'll bring up a map. And basically from top to bottom, what you'll see is that you've got Russia on one side, right? So Russia's your right hand. And then from top to bottom, the NATO countries have brought into the mix Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, which basically all border the Russian border, and then they border Belarus and Ukraine. So literally the only two countries along the Russian eastern border that are not part of NATO are Ukraine and Belarus. So that's why this is such a big deal in terms of Ukraine being part of NATO. Yeah, you know what? If you guys can do that, seriously, I would highly recommend just grab your phone real quick and Google NATO countries. When you look at it on a map, it makes a lot more sense.
Then the U.S. led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart.
All right, I really need to do a deep dive on Serbia, Kosovo, all that, because honestly, I don't have a great working knowledge of it. But just know that what happened there was they basically invaded Serbia to break the country apart in order to create Kosovo, which got created in 2008. And the whole point of that was to give NATO a foothold, like right in the mix where they needed to be closer to Russia again.
The Russians didn't like that very much. But even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship.
He touches on something that I'll pull some clips on this, but Putin wanted to join NATO, like he really did. And it was Bill Clinton who told him, no, that's never going to happen. And again, this was all after it kind of was supposed to happen. So this is interesting stuff. It really is. But again, like, according to the things that I've seen, and again, I'll pull this stuff, Putin really wanted to play ball. But just remember something when you hear the rest of this, once the Cold War ended and Russia was no longer the enemy or the big bad wolf, we no longer had an enemy. We didn't have a big bad wolf. And so that falls into, well, then why are we spending all this money on the military? Why is the military industrial complex even needed anymore? Well, without Russia as the big bad wolf and the antagonist.
9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you. We understand, to root out terror. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. What it did was trigger the U.S. putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. In 2004-05, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election, and he became president in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine.
This stuff honestly is so complicated and so convoluted. But again, remember, we've talked about this before. Viktor Yanukovych in 2009 is democratically elected as the president of Ukraine. And really, he got elected because he was like, hey, we're going to be neutral. We're going to be Switzerland. We don't want to join NATO. We don't want to join Russia. Just leave us alone. We're kind of in the middle of this, but we don't want to take a side.
So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Sachs, who's a senior State Department official till today.
The reason I really respect and love this Jeffrey Sachs guy and John Mearsheimer is these guys bring receipts, man. They bring stamped full receipts. And he talked about this person, Victoria Newland. That's another person I need to get us introduced to a little bit more, because she is one of those people that has been incredibly powerful and influential, but you never hear about her. You know, very similar to Henry Kissinger.
And they talked about regime change. So they made the new government. The U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries.
Again, if you have like 20 seconds, pull up a NATO countries map on your phone. When you see it on a map, it makes a lot more sense. It really does. You basically will see the NATO countries stacking up against the Russian border and then stacking up against the border of Ukraine and Belarus. And so again, if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, then pretty much the entire Russian border besides Belarus has NATO countries along the left side.
On December 15, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement.
The date of that is important. December 15th, 2021. December 15th is my mom's birthday. But December 15th, 2021, Putin puts that on the table. Okay, no NATO enlargement. And really, if you think about it, the only thing left to enlarge is Belarus and Ukraine.
The special military operation started, and 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality.
So how crazy is that? Zelensky then basically said, okay, cool, neutrality.
And then the United States and Britain said, no way.
All right, you know what? I don't know where he's going with this because I haven't listened to the entire clip, but I do remember hearing that Boris Johnson was the dude that basically convinced Zelensky not to have neutrality and basically to go to war. Let's see.
You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave.
All right, come on. Give me some props on that one.
Absolutely ghastly. We have to understand we're not dealing with, as we're told every day, with this madman like Hitler. This is complete bogus, fake history that is a purely PR narrative of the U.S. government. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them.
Wow, that was pretty awesome. I'll try to find that entire interview. Maybe that'll be one of the episodes I play the entire interview like I've done a few times now. All right, so listen to that. And then actually this came out yesterday. Tucker Carlson is back in Russia. And again, I'm telling you, anybody that rolls their eyes when I say Tucker Carlson, I promise you're wrong about him. I really do. You're wrong about the guy. He's legit. Now, again, I don't agree with everything he does or says, and I think he soft sells certain things and doesn't necessarily take a stance on some things I wish he would. But, you know, he really does go after the truth. And you know, he absolutely has a bigger picture, 30,000 foot view on so many things. He really does. He really does. All right, so this came out yesterday.
In the week since we left Russia, Moscow, where we are now, in February, after interviewing Vladimir Putin, we've watched from the United States as the Biden administration has driven the U.S. ever closer to a nuclear conflict with Russia, the country that possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. It has accelerated ever since, and it's reached its apogee so far in the weeks after Trump's election. He is now the president-elect. In that time, just a few weeks ago, the Biden administration, American military personnel, launched missiles into mainland Russia and killed at least a dozen Russian soldiers. So we are, unbeknownst to most Americans, in a hot war with Russia, an undeclared war, a war you did not vote for and that most Americans don't want, but that is ongoing. And because of that war, because of the fact that the U.S. military is killing Russians in Russia right now, we are closer to nuclear war than at any time in history. Far closer than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That would mean the elimination of Russia, the United States, and most of the rest of the world.
So he's back in Russia. I have to imagine he's going to do another interview with Putin. All right, let's listen to the rest of this.
We felt there must be someone behind the scenes in Washington working to make sure that this conflict doesn't become a nuclear holocaust. But we found out that no, in fact, there is nobody. Tony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, cut off all contact between the U.S. and Russian governments. There is no back channel, there is no conversation, and there hasn't been for more than 2 years.
If that is true, that is ridiculous. So he's saying Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and the Biden administration has no conversations going on with Russia for over 2 years. I mean, it's probably true. That's one of those things that like I hear and I'm like, nah, there's no way. I'm sure they're doing it behind the scenes, but they don't want to tell us. But I will have to believe Tucker on this. Maybe there is no conversation. That's crazy.
That's shocking. Meanwhile, most Americans have no access to any perspective other than that granted to them by NBC News and the New York Times. They don't know how close we are. They don't know the Russian perspective. We've been trying for over a year to get that perspective out to American news consumers. We've also tried for over a year to get an interview with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. We've attacked that from a bunch of different angles. We've spoken to a lot of different people around him, had dinner with them. We've been in talks continuously, and those efforts have been thwarted by the U.S. government. The American embassy in Kiev, which our tax dollars pay for, told the Zelensky government, no, you may not do the interview.
That is insane. Like, think about that. The American consulate in Ukraine told Zelensky, you cannot do an interview with Tucker Carlson.
You can talk to CNN, you can't talk to us. So we've been unable to speak to him. So we came back to Moscow yesterday to interview the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, the longest serving foreign minister in the world. He's been a part of this government for 25 years. He's been in the diplomatic corps for over 40. And ask him, where exactly are we? Are we headed toward an unprecedented conflict between Russia and the United States? Is there any way to peel Russia back from the east, from the sphere of China, back into the west? Is that alliance permanent? And does the election of Donald Trump mean an end to this war, which is reshaping the world, the U.S. economy, the global economy, and risking the life of every person on this planet? Is that possible? We just walked out of that interview. It's absolutely fascinating. It's coming very soon. We hope you'll watch.
All right, so it looks like he interviewed Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister. I don't know who that is. I've never heard of him. But all right, I will keep an eye out and obviously watch that and see if there's anything interesting there and bring it to you. So anyway, all right, man, 28 minutes. This episode kind of got away from me. All right, everybody, call a spade. Seriously, if you look at a map of the NATO nations in terms of geography with Ukraine and then Russia, I think this will all make a lot more sense. All right, that's it. Talk to you soon.
That was a great way to end it.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.